Boy, do I have a story for you guys. Wait till you hear this. Let me introduce you to E.W. Marland. E.W. Marland is going to be our 10th governor. He's a Democrat from about the Ponca City area. He's going to help us through the Great Depression, but he did own Marland Oil. And Marland Oil is at Ponca City. He got up there and um, drilled for oil and made millions. He actually owned 1/10 of the world's oil at one time. So we're talking about a guy with some major money. He built a huge mansion up there in Ponca City. Many of you guys have told me that you've been to it. But we're going to talk about E.W. Marland for just about 5 minutes. And um, you're going to love this. Where does Marland get the controversy? Well, it comes from his first wife named Virginia. Virginia had a sister back in Pennsylvania who could not take care of her two kids. And a lot of times back in the early 1900s, if you couldn't take care of your kids, you would get um, your family to help out. And if your sister is married to a billion multi-zillionaire, why don't you ask, hey, can you take care of my son and my daughter? So Virginia convinces Ernest to adopt her niece and her nephew, George and Lydy. Well, Virginia gets sick and dies in 1926 um, while they're building this massive mansion. So Virginia never got to live in the big mansion. A year after um, a year after Virginia dies, Ernest and his adopted daughter slash niece got on a train and went back to Pennsylvania, where they had the adoption annulled. Then they got married. So that's where the controversial comes from, is that Ernest Marland, who is considerably older, she's like 19 years old, and he's like in his 40s. He marries his adopted daughter. And that's where a lot of people are going to bring the judgment out and didn't really like this at all. So Lighty is an interesting character too. And you can laugh about this if you want, but there's a family photo and there is Virginia, Marland's first wife, and then the little girl next to him is his future second wife. So have fun with that. But Lighty Marland is an interesting character. If that looks familiar, it's because the hostile takeover of Marland Oils became Conoco. And if you go to Ponca City, the majority of them are Conoco or the company that has bought out Conoco. But because of this weird marriage to his adopted niece slash daughter, the Marland Oil Board of Regents did what's called a hostile takeover, where they buy out all the stocks. And when they buy out all the stocks, they own the majority of them, and they can actually kick him out. So they bought out his stocks and kicked him out. It's called a hostile takeover. And so that's why if you look at Conoco's symbol and you look at Marland Oil's symbol, it's very similar. But if you ever get a chance to go to Ponca City, there are two houses that you've got to go see. The first one's called the Marland's Grand Mansion, and it's on Grand Avenue. And the mansion's up on the hill. It's the site of it. This is actually, it's no longer there. It's not part of the house anymore. This is the gardens that they built next to it. And so you talk about, wow, those are some nice gardens. And this is the house right there, the beginning of it. Yes, it's my daughter. She likes seeing mansions. What's underneath this red thing is really cool, but this is the side of the mansion that you can see at the top of that garden. And the inside's pretty neat. The majority of it is a museum. It's not really, if you want to see stuff that's E.W. Marland's, you've got to go to the other mansion, but not this one. But it's kind of cool to go see. This is the treasure. When I said it was underneath it, it's an indoor swimming pool. And to the right there, you can see one of Virginia's swimsuits from the 1920s or 19 teens, probably. That is unheard of to have an indoor swimming pool back in this day. They had the money to do it. And this is the Marland Mansion, the big old mansion that is really cool to go see. This is the back of it. You want to? I guarantee you guys, you may not like history, you may not like whatever. You're gonna love seeing this house. It is cool. This is called the Hunter's Room, and if you look at that, it doesn't make sense if you look at it from here, but if you actually look at it in its entirety, it's actually the history of Oklahoma in the whole roof. It's a really cool room to see. Anyway, it's one of the big rooms on the side. This is George Marland's room, and I mean, just everything about this house, every corner, every part of it. You're like, wow, they spent a lot of money on this. From the art to the ceilings to the chandeliers to, oh gosh, every part of this house, you would just like, wow, you know, this is actually a hot steam bath. You get in it and you turn it on and it makes you sweat. Sauna. Um, and this is Lighty's room. It's pink, and yeah, you can see her in the staying in the corner. It's not a ghost. That is actually a cutout. And this is called the Will Rogers room because Will Rogers liked to visit, but it's one of their guest rooms. Now, what's neat about this is a prohibition tunnel. And it goes out from the back of the house to another area where they could bring alcohol inside the house without anybody knowing. Now, if you look at the floor, you can see footprints in the cement, and they're very vague until the ground is wet because there's a lake right next to it. So the moisture from the lake gets in on that, and it brings out the footprints all the way down there. And if you look at the footprint, it's the same shoe size as Lighty. And sometimes some of the footprints you can take your foot and run over it, and it disappears, and it reappears. But yeah, it's kind of cool. If you ever get a chance to see that, it's you have to make the tour, or you have to know someone to get in there. They just don't let you walk into that without someone supervising you. But here's some other parts of it. These are more professional pictures. The other ones were my pictures. These are not. These are more professional pictures with the camera that you can get the better light, I guess. But here you go. This is a little video about E.W. Marland.
When E.W. Marland was inaugurated the 10th governor of Oklahoma on January 14, 1935, the woman who moved with him into the governor's mansion was his niece, his daughter, and his wife. The story begins with Virginia, the first Mrs. Marland, who he married in 1903. After making and losing fortunes in West Virginia coal, the couple moved to Oklahoma in 1908 and set about amassing a new fortune and eventually building the Marland Mansion in Ponca City. Along the way, they adopted Virginia's niece and nephew, Lyde and George. Virginia Marland died in 1926, 2 years before the lavish home was completed, and in 1928, as the house was nearing completion, Marland had Lyde's adoption annulled and married her. The happy couple's happiness didn't last long. That same year, Marland Oil was the target of a hostile takeover, and Marland was forced out of the company he founded. By the early 1930s, he and Lyde could no longer afford the utility bills on the big house and moved into a smaller building on the grounds. After his term as governor, they moved back into the cottage and in 1941 sold the $5 million mansion to a group of Carmelite fathers for $66,000. Governor Marland died in 1941. Leidy lived reclusively on the grounds until 1953 when she mysteriously left town for 22 years. She came back to Ponca City in 1975, supported the city's purchase of her estate, and moved back into the cottage where she died in 1987. I'm Charles Newcomb with Centennial Stories.
Yeah, Lady Marland is a very interesting character. Um, she literally left. Like they actually know through history that she jumped in her car without her left all of her like IDs. She didn't have any IDs with her, and she disappeared for 22 years. And if you look it up or read about it, she appears in random cities being a maid or working in a store or something like that. And then finally, in 1975, somebody ran into her and actually paid her way to come back to Ponca City. Um, and that's where she came back in 1975, and she dies in 1987. But it's just a really it's just an interesting character. There was rumors, and I don't know if they ever are going to do it or not. But they were going to make a movie called The Edge of Dawn or something like that that had Jennifer Lawrence playing Lady Marland. That was back in 2012. Of course, I don't think it came through. I looked it up today, but there's books about her. There's all kinds of stuff. She's just an interesting character. But that's Lady Marland. Anyway, that's the Marlands.